Hello, welcome back to the ED show. Wonderful Christmas Eve episode. We're recording, and we've got a very interesting guest. His name's Philip, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about astrology.
Yeah, I came across Philip on a show quite a few months back on Charlie Ward's channel, and he blew me away. And I've been following him ever since. And the subjects he's going to be talking about today is astrology. And I didn't realize until I started following him how that links to almost everything. So I'll hand you guys over to Philip to a rare treat that we've got today. And take this away.
Well, thank you very much for reaching out to me and making me feel so welcome on your channel. I'm really grateful to be with you guys.
Thank you.
Especially on such a pinnacle time that we're living in. We just had the solstice a couple of days ago, which was always a very powerful time, because the solstice is where we get a lot of our knowledge of astrology in the simple mechanics of the cosmology. Because a lot of our religions that we get put into our schooling, I mean, in the UK, we pretty much live in a Christian society, even though most of us wouldn't be, in a sense, the first to put up our hands and say it, because they do teach the religion at most of the schools. I mean, I went to a C of E, which is a Church of England school when I got started. And so I was very familiar with the biblical stories. And the story of the sun that's born on Christmas is actually the story of the sunshine and the days getting longer, because the winter solstice is the day where we have the least sunlight for the whole year. And that's on the 21st of December. And it's actually that the sun stays stationary for 3 days in the Tropic of Capricorn, which is right above Australia, far from England, which is why in England, the Northern Hemisphere, if you will, it is actually the darkest time for those 3 days. As of the 25th, which is Christmas Day, this is when the days start to slightly get more long. It's actually the beginning of winter, because it still takes a while for the ground to thaw out, and so we have to deal with the fact that we might have had to prepare resourcefully to ensure that we're going to make it through the next 3 months until the sun actually arrives back and starts thawing out and bringing warmth back to the area where it's going to be hats, coats, and gloves for the next 90 days, and umbrellas.
Not so much in Mexico, though.
Oh, well, I'm in Mexico at the moment, and I'm more like, it's more about t-shirts and ensuring that there's enough t-shirts to change into after sweating through one. So yeah, this is the first time I've been in Mexico for Christmas. I've only spent one Christmas before this outside of the UK, so it's a very different situation. However, I'm still in the Northern Hemisphere, and so the days are still shorter here. Like it gets darker. It's pretty much 12 hours a day, 12 hours of light here, because we're right on the equator, something like that. And so it gets dark probably as 11 and a half hours of light. So it's only like 6:30 it's getting dark here, but people are used to it getting dark about 8 o'clock apparently. So there's not too much of a change, whereas we've got a dramatic change in the UK. It gets dark at like 4:30, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it gets up light about 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, if it gets light at all, because it's overcast, as you like. No doubt. I miss though the atmospherics. I love the turns of the seasons. It's just the fact that they last so gosh darn long, depending on where you live in the world. And so, yeah, with the winter solstice, it reflects opposite the summer solstice. And so it's when the sun is born. But when we have the longest day, which is when the sun reaches the Tropic of Cancer, which is right above the UK and all the Northern Hemisphere, we actually experience that we have the most daylight. It might last 16 hours of daylight and only 8 hours of darkness. But what we celebrate come the 25th July, would be that actually we have the death of the sun. It's rather than the birth of the sun, because the sun will slowly start to die, and we celebrate the crown of thorns, because actually this, in a sense, the Messiah Jesus was put on a cross, right, and he had the crown of thorns which bled out. Well, actually, it's the sun rays getting longer and longer through the course of the summer, and the shadows get longer and longer too, the dog days of summer. And so what we're doing is we're harvesting the wine by the end of summer, because the blood is the wine. And so all of the stories are just basically talking about astrology. They're just talking about the cosmology. They're just talking about the dance of the sun above the earth, and how this makes the seasons. And so really, this is why astrology is so rich. But this past solstice, serendipity, so I'm not sure if I said that correctly, serendipity had it to be the case that we had Saturn and Jupiter meeting, and they meet every 20 years, just like the sun and the moon meet every 28 days. And so we call that the Great Conjunction. And in between that, they'll have the Saturn and Jupiter opposition, which they're 10 years into the cycle, which is a bit like a full moon. So the Great Conjunction is a bit like a new moon. And so this meeting of the sun and the moon mirrors the meeting of Saturn and Jupiter. You could say that the sun is a bit more like Jupiter. The sun is more about giving sunlight and broadening rays, whereas Jupiter is more like expanding the philosophy, giving more, grandiose, whereas the moon's more like reserving. I reflect, I nurture, I give a cuddle, I receive. Whereas Saturn's more like restriction, I confine, I authorize, but only because I'm growing on this apparatus. And so these are the two kind of, in a sense, masculine or feminine types of energy, or receptive and active kind of energy. You could say it's more obvious or more subtle types of energy, and both are equally. You could even say that subtle energy can be more powerful. If you think about the owl or a snake or a bat, they're predators, these types of characters, and yet they are using their subtle energies and their deep, shrewd observations to catch their prey. And so you can say that actually there's a lot more power in the subtle energy that is least obvious, whereas the predator who goes like the lion, ferocious lion, it's more distinct. But there's swings and roundabouts of all these types of things. And so the Great Conjunction, going back to Saturn and Jupiter, is very powerful, because Saturn is the rules, the regulations, the authority, and the boundaries, the governance, if you will, the health and the education situations. And they don't necessarily always serve the people. They can restrict the people to format, and against, you could say, they help regulate and give organization to what would be a herd of wild geese or sheep. And so, but you need a little bit of philosophy behind this kind of, and a bit of wisdom, and a little bit of something which has got more nous to it, rather than just having cold, hard rules. There's reason and there's depth and there's meaning behind the rule that actually gives it the opportunity to last and to expand. Otherwise, it's just going to be thrown out with a baby in the bathwater. That this doesn't actually work. It doesn't serve. And so when the two come together, it might be a bit restricting. Like right now, Saturn and Jupiter, things are a bit restricted, aren't they?
Yeah.
We're having the world locked down like never before. And so these cycles come in ebbs and flows. And it so happens that this particular meeting of Saturn and Jupiter, which happens every 20 years, is more potent, more powerful, bringing the end to many more cycles and the introduction to many more as well. Because Saturn and Jupiter have been they meet predominantly in one element for their meeting of every 20 years, and for the past 150 to 200 years, Saturn and Jupiter would have met in predominantly Earth signs, which are Taurus, Virgo, and Capricorn, which represent the physical, tangible reality that we live with. It represents the food, economy. It represents harvest and the health and the body. It represents, as I say, those governmental structures and how we regulate and support ourselves with boundaries as well. And so this is what we've learned. We've actually had an industrial revolution through these past 150 years. And we've come together through very much the ability to share in stocks and trade and all of these types of things, and commerce. And this is very powerful for our evolution. It's also very much restricting. In a sense, you become reliant on things like Amazon. It's a bit more complex with Saturn and Jupiter now. I'll make it a little bit confusing, but it's the truth of the matter. And that is that actually there is always a waiver. So yeah, for the past 150 to 200 years, they met in just Earth signs, except for in 1980, where they met in Libra, which is an air sign, the first of the air signs where they shall be meeting now for the next 250 years. Oh, excuse me, for the next 150 to 200 years. But that was in 1980. So they always go air, as for instance, they go Earth, 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 Earth every 20 years. And then it went air, and then it went back to Earth, actually, in the year 2000, where they met in Taurus. And it was actually just 2-3 days ago that they met in Aquarius. And they won't be meeting in Earth again for what will be about 600 years or so. It will be actually, it's an 800-year cycle, but it is in total. And so with regards to them, us kind of going into that kind of energy again, we're not going to experience it for centuries. Whereas for the rest of the evolution, we're more moving into a more higher mind. Instead of owning this particular cattle, owning that magazine, owning the woman on the front of the magazine, because she's my wife, this kind of a thing, owning the new Adidas or the new Rolex, this isn't going to be of our interest, because of the squeeze from certain other influences. It's not going to be on a higher ranking of necessary components to have a Rolex, to have a wife, to have this kind of thing. We're going to put our importance on a higher echelon of education or awareness, and this is going to be interesting. But at the same time, Aquarius isn't just this perfect reality. Excuse me. Aquarius is more also about how it's technological advancement. You see that Black Mirror, that's very Aquarius, isolated. Is there less connection? Well, we've seen the new rules happen because actually the complex nature of astrology said that actually Saturn made ingress into Aries, which means Saturn made ingress into Aquarius at the beginning of Aries season back in March. And this is when we had the world lockdown initially. Yeah. And this means it brought the new rules and regulations, a little taste of what we were experiencing now, just a little serving about what we're stepping into. We're only just getting our feet wet. And so basically Saturn went to 2 degrees of Aquarius before, well, it didn't even make it to the 2nd degree before it retrogressed back into Capricorn, where it spent most of the past 3 years. In fact, it was with Saturn in Capricorn where Pluto has been since 2008, and Jupiter came in at the end of last year. So we had Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in Capricorn for the first time in 735 years. The last time was in 1284. Wow. And so we check out the history of 1284, and they had the mythology take place, and it was actually written into the stained glass window of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, which burnt down in, I think it's 2019, which is prophecy. That was prophesized, and so it's very interesting. But the actual mythology of the Pied Piper of Hamelin is a retelling of the St. Patrick story, which is all about a limitation to communication. St. Patrick drove the snakes out of Ireland, and the snake is, in a sense, the tongue. The tongue. Like in English, our tongue's pretty flat. And I've been learning a bit of Spanish, and you've got to wiggle the tongue a bit under and a bit over. It speaks like in Mexican waves. And so it's got to do acrobatics. And even just saying, I recently learned the word for orange. We say orange. It's so simple and easy. But to ask for orange here, it's naranja, which means they've got to literally bend the tongue underneath and then back over the top. And it took me a long time. Thankfully, I had a beautiful woman to watch their lips and tongue. Stay with me for a couple of days. Yeah, well, you need a good teacher. Whatever you lend your eye to becomes your greatest teacher. And so, but the thing is, it would make me laugh because I was all fingers and thumbs trying to pronunciate this word with the tongue flipping back and forth. It was flipping hard. I'm a very phonetic speller in general, which is what Spanish is all about. But because I went through a Saturnian schooling that taught me that it's not all about phonetics, which is funny because my name is Philip, but it sounds like an F or a TH, right? That PH, TH, and F, they're all the same sound. But with regards to the etymology and the phonetics of it and the actual lettering and how it's written, it's all very much autonomous in English, whereas it's got more vibrational frequency and guttural nature of the throat in Spanish. And so, yeah, I've kind of lost what I was talking about there. But with regards to the dialect and how we go into these different, because basically when you change the language, you change what you're manifesting, and you change your connection to vibration and frequency. And so English is just not very much connected to vibration and frequency whatsoever. And this is something that was actually channeled in the middle of these two ages, 1284 and the year 2020. In the 1500s, John Dee, which is played by Stephen Fry in Blackadder, in Queen Elizabeth, Blackadder the second or third.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that. The second, I think it was.
The second, where he played Lord Melchett.
My favourite part really is my favourite one is that particular adaptation of Blackadder. Yeah. That's my favourite one. The second one, I love it.
The Queen, she's so good and funny, isn't she?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
And so, with Stephen Fry plays that character, which is a famous astrologer called John Dee, and he had a crystal ball. He was a famous magician, a dark magician, who actually was paid by the royals of that day, not just the English one, but like all over. Because, like, in a sense, the royals aren't nationalists; they are all a club, and they smash you over the head of their club. Which is a quote I stole from someone who I like, called Ralph Smart. But basically, we go to the nightclubs not to have a good time, so that they can sell us their spirits, so they can get us intoxicated and waste our money. And really, that's a lot of being beaten over the head by the same patriarchal system and groomed by society in a way which doesn't embrace spirituality, doesn't embrace connection and awareness, but actually divides us with its many devices. This being a device that actually gets us stuck into social media, language being a device which gets us disconnected. How disconnected did I feel when I arrived here in Mexico? Absolutely bloody isolated I felt, because I didn't know a word of Spanish. And so it's been vital that I had to learn and continue to practice to learn. I'm very much at the beginning stages of it. Point being that in 1284, there was this media told, like a media story, like a song. The Pied Piper would be encouraging people to go a certain route or a certain way with their lives, and it drove the consciousness out of the masses. The mythology is like he drove the children down a mine shaft, and then there was a disaster down the mine shaft. But you could even say it's about sex trafficking and all of this type of thing that's been going on for eons. You know, it's not just 735 years, it's more like 6,000 years. And so when we recognize that this is what we're dealing with, then we were able to see that these things have been going on, and it's not necessarily that they can already be cleaned up in the blink of an eye, but what one can do is become more aware consciously through seeing the disconnect, when you see people in masks, in a sense, which was actually the thing that was brought in this year, the mediocrity with the media telling stories, we can become disconnected and think, oh, look at those people wearing a mask, what a bunch of idiots. Or you can become compassionate for the fear that they've been seduced by and think, those poor bastards wearing a mask. I've had to wear a mask since I've been here because I didn't know the rules and regulations in certain areas. And I never wore a mask once in England because I was within my own authority, you know. But here I had to when I got on the plane to Air France. But the point is, I'm saying have compassion for people wearing a mask if they're an old lady or if they're a young person who's got children, whatever it is, or maybe they've just watched too much BBC. I don't really matter. The point is that they've been demoralized to the degree that they've had their moneymaker hidden. So that's a separation. I mean, eye to lip coordination. When you see something, you don't really know what's going on. If you're being scrutinized, or if there's actually, you know, when someone's smiling at you because there's a bloody stupid great big smile gawking back. But when that's hidden, you don't really know people's true motives, this kind of thing. And so instead of doing the vow shift, shouting out to fellow researcher, the black sheep researcher, he'd be a good interview, by the way. He talked about the vowel shift that happened because of the John Dee channeling this language, which is Gaelic backwards English, which is very autonomous and of the mind. Funny, I met a Mexican yesterday, and she said she prefers English because it means that you don't have to go which is a bit of Spanish I couldn't say, to say the house is red, which is very much more direct and descriptive, but to the point, if you will. But so there's pros and cons with both sorts of language. They in the Bible described it as the Tower of Babel, didn't they? Yes. And so that's what is just like the flags, another technology that was brought in over the past centuries to demoralize us. Just like the moon landing, just like the story of dinosaurs, just like the gender and the race, and it was like all of these things are inventions of the mind. And so what this great conjunction does is brings in more separation. It's brought in more separation because we've had new rules come into our society, especially enforced by these alien corporations and things like this. All sounds a bit not very cheery, but really when we come into the consciousness of this, we're like, hey, I'm going to go above and beyond with people who feel disconnected and show them love, even if they're not able to show me love back. On the days that I have loved myself enough, that I've got enough to share, because some days you don't feel like you have enough to share, do you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Some days, gracious, I don't feel like saying boo to a goose. But when you do have enough gusto to be able to go out there and say, how do you do? I see you, you know, are you feeling good? I intend that you are feeling good, then we're actually able to share and make the connection. Just like synapses of the brain, electricity coming together, we're different fingertips of the universe connecting and sharing the embrace, even if it feels that it's not being always received. We go out and we do our bit, we embrace and we ingratiate ourselves to the world. And that's Jupiter. Jupiter is the guru which demonstrates the love and the philosophy, whereas Saturn is that which is restricting of it. But we are Saturn too. So it's about also asserting our boundaries. You're like, I don't want you looking at me too much, gawking. Thank you very much. This is an assertion of my boundary. I don't want to watch the TV, which tells us all this kind of information through media. And so I don't have the TV plugged in. And so that's my boundary. And if I walked into someone else's house where they had the TV on all the time, I might choose to go and sit in another room or go and sit in the garden because it might become a bit too much after 5 minutes or two, you know. And so, yeah, Saturn and Jupiter meeting in Aquarius, where they haven't met for 800 years, wouldn't happen in March because Saturn went in there alone. And so, again, this was just a taste of these new rules which we've had to live through. But we've had a greater, in a sense, bit of our own authority. It woke us up. Many people woke up due to the shaking of that, the demoralization of what we experienced. More people became aware, took more of a stance on things like astrology or even spirituality, which is actually the route that I took was through becoming more spiritually interested, that made me interested in different cosmologies And then I came into astrology through that about 10 years ago. And I didn't stop. I just ended up reading books and reading books. And astrology is for everybody. I mean, there's some people which are astrologers which like to share it, and then you can get the apps. Again, an app will only give you so much information. It will give you, in a sense, the answers, but it's a bit like going to a fast food restaurant, right? You don't learn how to cook if you always go to the fast food restaurant, but it's good to be able to fend for yourself. And so I love to teach astrology on my YouTube channel. I love to empower people and try and give people more information which about how all of these cycles work, rather than just saying, okay, Saturn and Jupiter met. This means that there's going to be more revolutionary aspects to reality and also a lot more constraints. I could have just said that at the beginning to you guys and we'd have been done in 5 minutes. But this gives a lot more depth to really the overall arcing philosophy of what's going on. And so, for instance, Saturn and Jupiter, as I said, met in the 80s. And those people who were born then would have been, they'd be about 40 now. I've spoken to a couple of people who have got that Saturn and Jupiter in Libra. You've got it yourself, have you?
Yeah, well, I was born in 79, but I was born on the back end of 79, or the arse end of 79, as they say. I was born in October, and I'm a Libra. And yeah, I was going into 1980, so I'm 41. And yeah, it's yeah, I was born in that period you're talking about.
So you were born just as they had the happening, and that would have been very powerful for you as a young like a young baby, like, you know, it's been changing. And what actually it brought into our society was the computer, the innovation of a computer, the innovation of getting divorced, the innovation of having stocks and shares. And then how do you buy a computer though? I mean, like, only the very gifted people, like, who've got lots of money, in a sense, through the 90s would have had it. But then the year 2000 came around, and Saturn and Jupiter were to meet one last time in the Earth signs in Taurus. And that gave us credit cards. They went, I can get a computer, I can get an Android, I can get an iPhone. Some people got both, you know, because we can just put it all on the credit. And the credit, there wasn't really billionaires back then, but it soon was. And then there's trillionaires, there's trillions of pounds worth of and dollars worth of debt now, because they made like a black hole, in a sense, in the economy, which was born to die in the first place. But this was, in a sense, just a get what you can while you can over these last 20 years. And it's just now, you know, the banks are pretty much done. I imagine that the banks will be done within the next year or so, as people go to the different currencies that are becoming available and see that there are even better ways to trade. Once you get your resources sorted, you don't need to be going after money whatsoever. It's more about a economy-based resourceful kind of, if you've got everything, you're my family. I need to make sure you don't just perish, you know. And so it's about supporting each other by trading of vocational aptitudes. Like, some people need health and well-being, some people need things built, some people need all these different things. And we're learning about how technology can serve us in many different ways as well. And so it's about also discernment to that which we're buying into. Are we cutting our own noses off to spite our own faces when we get a PS5 because it's alluring and exciting and interesting? I certainly would love to see what it looks like. I've not even seen it in the shop yet. Certainly love to see what some of these games were, because I was indoctrinated with the magazines and bought them every week when I was a teenager. At the same time, I know if I was to invest any of my hard-earned time playing any of those games, what a massive absolute distraction that would be from my craft of astrology or from my social life. And so this is the interesting thing about our discernment. We can get very easily seduced by things which can be alluring. You know, there is a seductive nature to technology, all of these types of things. And so I would suggest that the best way for us to go, this is my this is advice, and advice, you know, is easily spat out and you leave it on the street. The best way is to show and demonstrate what works for you, what you are excited by. You might think that actually through technology you can share philosophy. I mean, we're talking now on technology,
yeah.
And so there is obviously inroads. Might even be able to find spiritual community via a PlayStation 5. It's not to say that all these things are negative. It actually could bring, for people who've been working in the armed forces, a lot of opportunities to defrag some of the hell that they've experienced while being on the front line, and that they play shooting games, which in a sense can be calming.
Yeah.
There's all these different facets which we can realize. And so, but the biggest thing is coming back to organic nature, coming back to farming, coming back to dancing, coming back to music and creating art. This is where the revolution is going to take place. This is where the message is going to be viable, and we're going to be brought back together through our music, through our comprehension of compassion that we can share with one another. This is the heart of it all, is actually coming out of the mind, which is and this and that. I've got to make a choice because I'm in fight or flight, and coming into the holistic nature of the heart, which actually brings us into a frequency which goes beyond. It actually ripples out and goes and emanates, goes much further. And yet it's in the center, the central space where this happens.
So do you think there's going to be a sort of a new renaissance starting in the next few months?
I feel like it's going to, yes, you're very much on the pulse there, and it's going to be a drip down and a ripple out. Each one of us, in a sense, feeling isolated. Even like I've spoken to people that they might be with their families right now, but they feel just as isolated as me, who's on my own out here in Mexico. It doesn't really matter where you are. You can't run or escape the astrology transits, no matter where you flee or fly to. You're going to feel the experience, the pros and the cons wherever you are. And so, for instance, I would like to write a book or something, and I'd like to do more creativity, and yet I've got the opportunity to grow ourselves with Saturn. Wherever Aquarius falls for us, we've got the opportunity to pay our due diligence with Saturn and to learn and be a guru with Jupiter. And so Jupiter moves much more fast. It goes one sign per year, whereas Saturn spends about 2.5 to 3 years in a sign. And so Jupiter will be moving on into Pisces actually by the spring, and then going back into Aquarius as it retrogrades in the summer. And so we can find that it's a bit like an inkjet printer. It takes a few layers to develop the whole picture. But through continuing to stick at things, laboring away with that passion, with our love, we can find that we do have a revolutionary expression of art. Like the music won't be all about like the way it has been, like guns and hoes and all of this types of things. Gangster rap has had its time in a sense, and it just won't be interesting. It's not palatable to the conscious development of people, or even to the, in a sense, for the better terminology, more subdued masses. It's not just going to be interesting because we're looking for something deeper. We're looking for a richer connection to ourselves and to one another. And if we're not seeing that on MTV, then we're going to look elsewhere. If we're not even seeing it on like the sport, because there's no crowd, and that is what gives the excitement. Whoa, whoa! It's exciting when they've got that, because it's humanity. And I'm a huge fan of professional wrestling, and it's dry without a crowd. Likely the same for football, which I would still enjoy, but without the crowd, it's not much, is it?
No, I agree. Yeah. It's killed it for me. I can't watch football and the same thing. For this virtual, same with the rugby. And, Wales lost terribly. But there was no crowd. And for me, it was just awful because regardless of the result, and everything else, without the crowd, it was nothing. But one of the things I did want to ask you, if I may, do you see an end to this Babylonian rule that we've had where humanity has been suppressed? Do you see us now being able to expand?
I see that it's going to be a small percentage of people. It's not going to be the masses. Firstly, this is talk. So Aquarius is the people, and it's the people are more powerful when they're together than the governments, which is Capricorn. However, the people are easily the government's prepared for this. they were ready to roll out the advertisements in January about come and collect your pizza at the doorstep. We'll deliver all your books to you from Amazon. All those adverts were prepared back in 2019. All of these things have been prepared for decades. And so when the advertisements is just like makes you feel safe, the way they talk to you, like Richard and Judy, that's a bit outdated. Fern and Philip, still probably pretty outdated. But like you know what I'm saying, they talk to you like your family on adverts on TV, and so they make you feel mollycoddled, like, and it makes for example, they did I saw a very Aquarian situation, and that was football style chant in England of people walking around going, stick the vaccines up your ass, stick the vaccines up your ass. And I thought that's pretty cool, and I send it to a few people on Instagram. And I don't try and sway people, you know. I have not been in England for almost 2 months, and I thought, and I don't talk to people about this type of thing too much, but I just sent it to an old school friend who actually works for the BBC. She works for them as a children's like presenter doing like art, right? And so she's only got the job a year ago, and I think, although obviously what we know about the BBC, I still think well done. You obviously worked really hard to get that job.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the thing is, I sent her this. I was like, yes, come on, England. People were singing this in the streets. Sent her the video of the thing, and she's like, please don't send me any anti-vaccine information. So the point is, like, there's my mum. She'd probably be wearing a mask, and I'd be surprised. It would break my heart if she gets a vaccine if they offered it to her, but I would be surprised if she turns it down, because some people were just fully gullible with regards to the media and the government. And so I wouldn't advise it for anybody. Obviously, it's not even common sense. I ran away from vaccines when I was a child. It's just not smart. I mean, I didn't get the measles, mumps, and rubella one, which you were forced to at school, but I did get one of them. They pinned me down and gave me one after taking days off, after then having to go to a surgery. I probably could have took my foot down and not gone to that fucking surgery. Excuse my French. Excuse my bad colloquialisms as well. Del Boy doesn't teach us very well, because in a sense, even the things in the media can make. How stupid do I sound now when I say a Del Boy quote? It makes you sound really ignorant. It's not funny, really. I mean, it might make us laugh for a moment, but it really is based upon ignorance. And so, and yet I still, because it's ingrained into the culture. I mean, it might be funny if I was with a couple of English people for a moment, but really it makes you look like an absolute idiot if you're in another country and you're trying to talk in French and you actually more Spanish and all this sort of thing. I've been looking before. But it's all right. Anyway, point is that through these different connections, we are going to have revolutionary acts. Saturn can be used as an apparatus to ascend upon, rather than like when something's a roadblock and a restriction, you use it to ascend. When you know the rules, you know not to be bombarded by them. For instance, I know how to stand up for myself and say, bullshit, I'm not wearing a mask on public transport when I'm in England, because I know the rules. I know they can't make you wear one. But here, I don't really have a leg to stand on, so I don't have the ability to enforce it, because I can't even speak the language, let alone know the rules. And so I just comply where I'm asked to do it. I've got the laser gone, and I'm going to go to a cafe and they shoot you with the laser in the neck. I've never had it there. I will refuse. But like I've had it on the neck, which is where they do it here, and that's not cool. You know, I know it's just like a TV remote, but it still all adds up, right? But some people would be righteous enough not to even do that, but they wouldn't have got to another country because I wouldn't have been able to go on an Air France plane to get here. So in some sense, you need to eat humble pie, but it's about choosing your battles, I suppose. I wouldn't say a vaccine is something which you choose, but it's something that you regret, because they can put things that lay dormant in these vaccines that, for instance, only come alive a decade later. It might be that you have something else come into the atmosphere that brings it alive, or even it's the inner body hormones that change for instance, you might have a vaccine when you're 15, and it's not until you're 35 that it becomes active.
Well, my first sort of experience with learning that maybe the government didn't have my best intentions was when I was 15 and I had the booster for, I think it was an MMR booster or something, you know, the one you were talking about in school. Not a month later, I became deathly allergic to wood, which is a weird one. But I'd been doing DT, you know, it was my favorite subject. I wanted to be a carpenter for like all of my childhood, you know. I was really good at it. I'm not just saying that I was the top of my year, you know, I could do a dovetail joint like that. I used to spend every lunchtime. I was a total DT nerd, you know. I was constantly just sanding bits of wood and cutting things, and had this jab, and a month later, couldn't touch the stuff.
That's
and
ridiculous.
I was like, what the hell's happened? And then I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, I think that's an autoimmune response that's kicked in because something's annoyed my system. So that was where I started developing, you know, this idea of look into things more. And would you say there's some sort of astronomical explanation for why some people are more accepting of top-down explanations or authoritative like stances on things without looking into things themselves? Or I'd be interested to know your point on.
Well, it would do to the upbringing of people and their charts and their family and also their trauma. Like sometimes you're more petrified and you just go along with things like Stockholm syndrome, right? And so, but I think that actually there's a biting point, and it like where you do get woken up. But at the same time, there are people that are going down the escalator, and the people that are going up the escalator. And the thing is, we might have bonded with some of the people that are going down the escalator, and it can be quite disheartening to see them going down. But you can't actually pull someone up and off a downward escalator. You just have to say, "I'll see you. Maybe we're back on the same floor again. You know, maybe we'll catch each other on the same floor at some point." But really, it's the level of acceptance and allowing. And this is the time of reshuffling the deck like that, in a way that we've never seen. As I say, that the element shift is really bringing an end to the old paradigm. And maybe we won't be working with the same people in the same ways. It's a possibility I might not ever get back into England, but I don't buy into that. I don't see that as a likelihood. There's a possibility I might choose never to come back. But at the same time, when I look at things, I mean, I like the idea of me maybe coming back in the spring, and just maybe not for long. But like, who's to say? But the potential is there that it could be that they never open the borders to someone who's never be able to fly again. That's the potential. I don't see that going to be the case. I see there being plenty of rites of passage. It's about showing that you can by authorizing. Like someone messaged me this morning going, "Oh, they've closed the borders. I can't get to Spain." I was like, "Where have you heard that?" I was like, "I'm sure if you could go to the airport and fly to Spain right now, if you really authorized it, there's nothing stopping me getting here. It's just you maybe been watching the TV and they said that they've closed the borders." You know, we've seen people fly from Spain to England, and it's on a lockdown, and it's very possible. It's about just going for it. And so, yeah, I see that basically this is going to continue to develop, and it's not something that's only just it's only just getting started. There's going to be people which will choose to live their heads in the sand, and there's going to be us which will demonstrate. And the demonstration is better than a protest. It's better than saying, "I've got a T-shirt that shows you that you're asleep." Better than doing, in a sense, we're preaching to the choir, and often with these videos, because really, what's going to show someone something different will be, oh, that person's gone and made a family and a living out of their life, you know. rather than going and towing the line and doing something that is the tried and tested. They're doing something which is clearly outstanding and alternative, and this means that they are very noticeable. And when someone's doing something that works, does it work? People pay attention to things that work. And so
I think one thing that's an example is that your channel's certainly something that works. I mean, I think any of our subscribers that aren't subscribed to Philip's channel should definitely go and check him out.
Yeah,
thank you.
we'll put the links in. And
Yeah, Darryl will whack all the links in when he uploads it.
well,
Sorry, Darryl.
Sorry, the other thing as well, which is quite unique about Philip, is that he'll do charts for people as well. So I'll put all the links in. If anybody's interested in Philip and his work, feel free to contact.
Would you like?
Well, the only thing I did want to sort of come on to, if I may, because I picked up on your live yesterday, so I wanted to leave the audience with this, because this is something the guys can do, and it's something I'm going to be doing, because I picked up on your live yesterday, was the full moon. Because I've noticed over the last few days we haven't had a full moon, and you mentioned yesterday that there's going to be a full moon. And I believe that's going to be between now and the 31st. Is that 30th?
Yeah, it would be on the 30th, and in the sign of Cancer, and so it's only a few days away. But it's going to be in a sextile, which is 60-degree angle to Uranus, which means that we were able to really find that as we release our connections emotionally to some of the things that don't serve us. And nurture us, we can find alternative ways that do bring soothing, that do bring sensuality in our community. It might not be that we get it directly from our family, but we do find that maybe our tribe shows up in a different way or different energy. Sometimes we have to cut ourselves free from an energy before we can see the next prosperous outcome manifest. So we might have to feel the suppression or feel the emotion to be able to allow those stories to fall away. But as we do emote and express and feel, that's the greatest and most real way to move the energy. It actually does. If you think of our reality as like a movie, the only way to change the movie real is to feel it into really allow that to dissolve the old situation, the old scene, the old set traditions that are going around in the old cycle. Sometimes we push away feelings, and it's because but actually going through the anxiety, going through the angst, and actually crying and feeling it allows it to dissipate, and that's where the alleviation comes from, and then the new things can come through. Example, I was like feeling anxiety, not knowing if I was going to get this place to stay, and I was like, oh, what's going to happen? But rather than going too much in the frustration and panicking, just sitting in the gap of the unknown, sitting in the dismay, that's often the best place to manifest the next thing, because it's allowing and accepting and supporting ourselves in that anxious space that allows the reflection of the universe to recognize that we are self-supporting and the universe is us. And so when we support ourselves internally, outwardly, we're supported as well.
It's funny you should say that. That's happened to me so many times in life. And it's only when you just said that I've sort of connected it. As you were saying it, and I'm not making this up, genuinely, as you were sort of saying that, I thought, yeah, because there's been times when my back's been up against the wall, and I don't know how, but it's always come together. But at the time, it seems like impossible. And it's like, how has that sort of happened? So, yeah, it's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like the mind. When we get into the mind, or we get into the old patterns which are ruled by mind, it just escalates and escalates. And we think, how can I do this? How can I do that? But actually, when we fall into the heart, it's actually coming into the 0 point of now, and just being now and doing what we can today is the best thing that we can do for the overall thing, the overall arc of our story. Otherwise, we're projecting into tomorrow, or we're dragging in yesterday into what we want to make today, or actually the more that we can just repackage and be present, and the new eventuality, the new outcomes can be the ones that carry us into greater outcomes.
Well, I think that was a wonderfully sort of engaging and positive episode, which is a rarity for us. But
Thank you.
You know, you've injected a lot of energy that I think is well needed in these times. And yeah, as I said earlier, it'd be great to have you on again.
Sure.
Maybe even a couple times if you're up for it, because I've really felt that there was an engagement there.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah, the same. I mean, I knew Philip struck a chord with me when I seen him back earlier on in the year, and yes, it's just a privilege to have you on. And yeah, I hope it's you know, from my point of view, I'll definitely remain in touch with you, and like I say, I continue to follow your channel and follow you really, and I'd advise anybody to sort of do that, because you know, everything is connected to astrology. And yeah, so over the next few days, it'll definitely get people's minds thinking towards this, and I hope everybody has a lovely Christmas, you know, and enjoys the festivities, and you know, lives and loves. That's the main important thing. Everyone's got to live life to the full and love.
And as we said earlier, all of Philip's information will be down in the description, as long as Darren remembers to do it, which I often don't. And yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed. I certainly did. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.